You ever watch a man get humiliated in front of 100 strangers and not move a single muscle? I did. I saw it with my own eyes. And I'm telling you now, what happened after still keeps me up some nights. Let me start from the beginning, because if I just jump to the end, you won't believe me. It was a Thursday, late July. London was having one of those rare weeks where the sky actually stayed blue and everyone walked around like they'd forgotten how to complain. I remember the heat sitting on the pavement like a wet blanket. The kind of day where the tar near the road goes soft and your shoes feel like they're sticking just a little. I work the coffee cart, have done for 11 years. My spot is just off the main road, a short walk from the palace gates where the tourists come in waves. Morning, midday, evening, like the tide. You learn to read them after a while. The ones who'll buy a flat white and tip. The ones who'll ask for directions and never buy anything. The ones who treat you like you're part of the furniture. That morning the crowd was thick. School holidays, see, families everywhere, kids on shoulders, phones up. Everyone trying to get the same photo a million people have already taken. And there he was, the guard. Now I don't know his name, I didn't then anyway. I learned it later and I'll get to that. But that morning he was just one of them, the bearskin hat, the red tunic, the black trousers with the stripe, standing on his little patch like a statue carved out of patience. People don't understand what those men do. They really don't. They think it's a costume, a photo op, a bloke standing still for a laugh. But I've watched these lads for over a decade and I'm telling you, what they hold inside the stillness, it's not normal. It's trained into the bone. You could light a fire under them and they'd stand there until the order came to move. This one was young, younger than most. I could tell by his jaw, smooth. Barely a man, really, maybe 20, 21 at a push. He had this look in his eyes, not blank like people assume. Focused, alive, like he was somewhere far away and right here at the same time. The sun was hammering down on that hat of his. You know those things weigh near enough 1.5 kilos. On a hot day under a black fur hat and a wool coat. I've seen grown men keel over in that gear, just drop, boom, out cold. And do you know what the others do? Nothing. They keep standing. It's not heartless. It's the job, someone else handles it. Anyway, the crowd was doing its usual thing. Photos, selfies, a few cheeky ones leaning in close to see if they could get a reaction. They never do. That's half the fun for the tourists, trying to crack the unbreakable. And then he showed up. I noticed him before anything happened. You develop a sense for it. Some people walk into a space and the air changes. He had that. Big fella. Sunglasses pushed up on his head. Expensive trainers, the white ones that cost more than I make in a week. Loud shirt. A camera around his neck and a phone in his hand, recording the whole time. Filming himself mostly. One of those types. He had a couple of mates with him. Laughing. Egging him on. You know how it goes. A pack of grown men acting like teenagers because they're far from home and nobody knows them. He started by standing too close to the guard, right up in his space, pulling faces. His mates were howling. He did the thing where he mimicked standing to attention, then broke it with a silly walk, filming all of it. Look at this guy, he kept saying. Look at this guy, he can't even move. I felt my jaw tighten. I've seen disrespect before, comes with the territory, but this was different. This wasn't a kid being daft. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing and enjoyed it. The guard didn't flinch. Of course he didn't. Eyes forward, rifle at his side, breathing slow. You could see the tunic rise and fall just barely. The tourist got bolder. They always do when there's no pushback. He waved his hand in front of the guard's face. Nothing. He shouted close to his ear. Nothing. He did a little dance. His mates filmed it from 3 angles like it was the funniest thing in the world. A few people in the crowd started to drift away. You could feel the mood curdle. There's a line, see. The tourists love watching someone try to make a guard laugh. That's harmless. But this had gone past harmless. This was a man trying to break another man for content. A mum near my cart pulled her little boy back by the hand. I remember that. She had this look on her face. The look you get when you sense something's about to go wrong but you can't say what. I should have said something. I've thought about that a lot since. I should have leaned over and told him to pack it in. But you don't, do you? You freeze. You think someone else will. You think it'll sort itself out. It didn't. The tourist, and I still can't believe I'm saying this. He stepped right in close, looked dead into the camera, gave this smug little grin, and he kicked the guard. Not hard, I want to be fair. It wasn't a proper kick. It was a shove with his foot against the guard's leg just below the knee, a flick, contemptuous. The kind of thing you'd do to a stray dog you wanted out of your way. But I heard it, the sole of that expensive trainer against the wool of the trouser, a dull thud, and then this silence. This horrible, sharp silence where even the tourist's mate stopped laughing for a second. Because here's the thing about those guards that this idiot didn't know. They're not statues. They're soldiers, active service. The rifle is real. The training is real. And there are rules, old, serious rules about what happens when someone interferes with a guard on duty. What the tourist expected, I think, was nothing. He expected the man to keep standing there, a free hit, a trophy clip for his followers. What he got was something else entirely. The guard moved. And when I tell you the whole crowd jumped, I mean it. People actually gasped. He brought that rifle up and across, slammed his boots together with a crack like a gunshot, and in a voice that came from somewhere deep in his chest, a voice that didn't sound like it belonged to that young, smooth face, he bellowed, "Make way for the Queen's Guard." I'll never forget it, never. It went through me. It went through everyone. The tourist actually stumbled backwards, tripped over his own fancy trainers and nearly went down. His phone flew out of his hand and skidded across the pavement. His mates scattered like pigeons. The crowd parted, and the guard, this young lad who hadn't moved a muscle for what was probably hours, took 3 sharp, thundering steps forward, rifle up, jaw set like iron. He wasn't going to hurt anyone. I understood that even in the moment, it's a display, a warning, a reminder of who you're standing in front of, but it didn't feel gentle. It felt like the ground had cracked open. The tourist's face went white. All that swagger gone in a second. He grabbed his phone off the floor, hands shaking, and backed away into the crowd, mumbling something none of us could hear. And then, and this is the part that gets me, the guard turned, marched smartly back to his exact spot, slammed his boots together once more and went still. Like nothing had happened. Eyes forward, breathing slow, statue again. The crowd erupted, people clapped. Someone shouted, "Good lad," a few cheered. The mum near my cart was nodding to herself, lips pressed tight like justice had been done, and it had in a small way. I remember thinking, that's the end of it. A daft tourist got put in his place. A good story for the cart. I'd tell the regulars about it for a week and then it'd fade. I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea that the worst day London had seen in years was still hours away. And that the same tourist, the loud one, the one who'd kicked a soldier for laughs, would be on his knees before sundown, begging that exact same guard to save his life. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the rest of that afternoon. Because everything that came after only makes sense if you understand how ordinary it all felt first. After the kicking incident, things settled. The tourist and his mates slunk off somewhere, probably to a pub to nurse their wounded pride and watch the footage back, deciding whether it was still funny. I served coffees. The crowd thinned and thickened with the rhythm of the day. The guard was relieved at some point. They rotate, you know. They don't stand for hours straight, though it can feel like it, and another took his place. I assumed I'd seen the last of him. The thing about that part of London on a hot summer day is how alive it gets. There's a particular sound to it, the shuffle of thousands of feet, snatches of 40 different languages, tour guides with their little flags held high. The clip-clop of a police horse now and then. Ice cream vans playing those tinny tunes. A busker down the way murdering a Beatles song on an out-of-tune guitar. You stop hearing it after a while. It becomes the texture of your day, background noise. I mention all this because of what it means when it stops. It was just past 3 in the afternoon. I just made a cappuccino for an older couple from somewhere up north, lovely pair. The husband insisted on paying with exact change and counted out the coppers one by one. I remember the woman laughing at him. I remember the foam on the coffee. Small things. Funny what sticks. And then the world tore in half. I don't know how else to describe it. There's no good way. People say explosion and you picture the films. It's not like the films. In real life, it's a thing you feel in your chest before your ears even catch up. A pressure. A punch of air. And then the sound, this enormous, ugly, flat crump that doesn't echo so much as flatten everything else. It came from over toward the park. Hyde Park direction. A way off but close enough that the ground seemed to shudder under my feet. For a second, and it really was just a second, nothing happened. Everyone froze. 500 people, maybe more, just stopped dead, all looking the same way, all making the same calculation. What was that? What was that? What was that? Then the birds went up. Every pigeon, every gull, every starling in the area lifted off at once in a great panicked cloud, and the noise of their wings was its own kind of terrible. And then the screaming started. It rolled toward us like a wave. You could hear it travel, first far off, then closer, then all around. People who hadn't even seen anything started running because everyone else was running. That's how panic works. It's contagious. It moves faster than information. The older couple in front of me, the husband grabbed his wife and just stared at me like I might know what to do. I didn't. My hands were shaking on the steam wand. I dropped a cup. I don't remember dropping it, but there it was, in pieces by my feet. People surged past the cart, knocked it, coffee everywhere. A pushchair nearly went over and a man caught it just in time. A woman was crying into her phone. I don't know, something's happened, I have to go. Strangers grabbed strangers' children and pulled them out of the crush. Someone fell and 3 people stopped to lift them up, even in the middle of all that fear. I held on to that after, people stopping to help, even then. I came round the side of the cart and I could see down the road smoke, a column of it gray-black climbing over the trees, and the smell reached us a moment later. Burning, chemical, wrong. Phones started lighting up everywhere. The buzz of 100 alerts going off at once. Sirens, already, somehow sirens, that rising falling wail multiplying as more joined. A man near me was shouting that it was a bomb, just shouting it. It's a bomb, it's a bomb, get away from the buildings, get into the open. I don't know if he knew anything or if he was just saying what we were all thinking, but the word spread and the panic doubled. And here's what your mind does in a moment like that. It looks for an anchor, something solid, something that isn't running. I looked toward the palace gates. And there he was. The guards hadn't moved. The whole world was coming apart, people screaming, smoke rising, the ground still seeming to tremble, and those men in the red tunics and the tall black hats stood exactly where they'd been standing. Eyes forward, rifles ready, calm as anything. I found him in the line, the young one. I recognized the jaw, the set of his shoulders, the one who'd been kicked. He was back on, or maybe he'd never fully left, I don't know, but he was there, and he wasn't running. In all that chaos, he was the stillest thing in London. I can't explain what that did to me. To see one man not panic when everyone else is. It steadies you. It's like grabbing a post in a flood. You don't realize how badly you needed something fixed and solid until it's there in front of you. And it wasn't just me. I watched it happen across the crowd. People in the grip of pure terror caught sight of those guards standing firm, and you could see the panic in them flicker. Not vanish, but flicker. Like the stillness was reminding them that the world hadn't ended, that order still existed somewhere, that there were men whose job it was to hold the line and they were holding it. Then orders started moving down the guard line. Sharp. Clipped. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the response. The formation shifting, men repositioning, a couple peeling off at a run toward the smoke with a discipline that made the chaos around them look even more chaotic by comparison. The young guard stayed at the gate, holding his post. And I thought in that moment of the man who'd kicked him a few hours earlier. I thought, where's the loud one now? Where's the big brave fellow with the camera now? I didn't know it yet, but I was about to find out. Because through the running crowd, stumbling, coming toward the gates and not away from them like everyone else, was a man in a loud shirt and expensive white trainers, with blood running down the side of his face. He was a mess. The swagger was gone, completely gone. The man who danced in front of a soldier for laughs was now lurching through the panic with one arm hanging wrong and his face a sheet of red. He'd been near the park, near where it happened. He must have wandered off that way with his mates after the morning, and now he was alone. No mates in sight. Just him, terrified, hurt, moving on instinct toward the only thing in the chaos that looked like it might help. The men who hadn't run. The guards. He didn't recognize the gate. He didn't recognize the guard. He was past thinking. He just saw red tunics and rifles and the word that means safety to a frightened person, soldier, and he went toward them. And of all the spots along that line, of all the men he could have stumbled toward, he went straight for the young one. The one he'd kicked. I started moving without deciding to. Came round the cart, pushed against the flow of the crowd. I don't know why, I just had to see. I had to be closer to whatever was about to happen. The tourist reached the railing, grabbed it. His legs were going. He was saying something, half words, choking on them, blood in his mouth, and I caught fragments as I got near. "Help please, my friends, there's people, please." And the guard looked at him. That was the moment. That was the whole thing right there. The guard looked at the man who'd humiliated him, who'd kicked him, who'd filmed it and laughed and called him a thing that couldn't move. He looked at him with blood on his face, begging. And I held my breath, because I'm a human being and a small, ugly part of me thought, go on, let him stew. Let him see what your discipline's worth now. He kicked you for a laugh and now look at him. But I didn't know these men yet. Not really. I'll tell you what the guard did in the next part, because it changed how I see people. It changed how I see this country. It changed how I see what it means to wear a uniform and mean it. But first you need to understand the choice he was facing. And you need to sit with that silence for a second, the way I had to. Because the thing about a real test of character is that nobody's watching for it. The cameras were down. The crowd was running. Nobody would have blamed a frightened young soldier for hesitating in front of the man who'd shamed him. Nobody would have ever known. Except him. I left you at the gate. The tourist clinging to the railing, blood running into his collar, begging. The young guard looking down at him. And that silence, the kind of silence that decides who a person really is. Let me back up just a little, because I need you to feel the weight of what was happening around them. It wasn't a quiet moment. It only felt quiet to me because I'd narrowed everything down to those two men. But all around, London was in chaos. The sirens were a wall of sound by now. Police were pouring into the area, armed police, the ones with the heavy vests and the serious faces, the ones you don't normally see and don't ever want to. They were shouting at people to move, to clear the roads, to get away from vehicles. There was a helicopter somewhere overhead, low, the thump of its blades pressing down on everything. The smoke over the trees had gone darker, thicker. And the rumors were already flying the way they do. Someone said it was a car. Someone said it was a bin. Someone said there was a second one coming, and that word second went through the crowd like ice water. People who'd slowed down started running again. Because the worst thing about a bomb isn't the first one. It's not knowing if you're standing where the next one's hidden. I mention all this so you understand. That guard had every reason in the world to be thinking about his own survival, about his orders, about the threat. He was a soldier in the middle of what might have been an ongoing attack, with a duty to his post and the people he was there to protect. And in front of him was one injured civilian, an idiot, a man who treated him like dirt. Helping that one man wasn't his job in that moment. If anything, his job was to stay sharp, stay at his post, keep his weapon ready, watch for the next threat. The easiest thing, the correct thing, you might even argue, would have been to call it in and let someone else deal with the bleeding tourist. But here's what happened. The guard's eyes moved, just for a second. He looked past the tourist, scanning, and I realized what he was doing. He was checking the crowd, checking the angles, checking whether stepping away from his post left a gap that mattered, whether there was an immediate threat, whether moving was safe. All of that in maybe 2 seconds, trained instinct doing the maths. Then he made his decision. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything kind. There wasn't time for that, and it wasn't the moment. But he reached out, one hand firm, and he caught the tourist by the front of that loud blood-stained shirt just as the man's legs finally gave out completely. He held him up. The man who'd been kicked held up the man who'd kicked him. I was close enough now to hear him. His voice wasn't the parade ground roar from the morning. It was lower, faster, controlled but urgent. The voice of someone who'd been trained for exactly this and had simply switched into it. "I've got you, stay with me. Look at me, you're all right. How many of you were there?" The tourist was sobbing, properly sobbing the way grown men do when the fear's bigger than their pride. "3. There were 3 of us. I don't know where there were people down. There's people on the ground near the—" "How many down?" "I don't lots, I don't know, please." The guard half turned and shouted something to the men along the line. A name, a code, I couldn't tell. But it moved. The whole formation responded. 2 more peeled off toward the smoke at a flat sprint. Another got on a radio. The young guard was passing information up the chain even as he held a stranger upright with one hand. This is the thing people don't get. He wasn't going rogue. He wasn't abandoning his duty for a single man. He was doing his duty, the bigger one, the real one, the one underneath the costume and the photos and the standing still. The duty to protect. He'd taken the worst thing that could happen and he'd folded it into his job without missing a beat. And the man he was protecting was the one who least deserved it. A woman from the crowd, a nurse, it turned out, she said so later, pushed in and took over with the tourist, got him sitting against the base of the railing, pressed something to the wound on his head. The guard let her, handed the man over the second there were better hands for it. Then he straightened up, scanned the crowd again, and went back to what he was doing. But not before something happened that I'll carry with me forever. The tourist sitting on the ground now, the nurse's hands on his head, shaking like a leaf, he looked up at the guard. And there was this awful, dawning recognition on his face. You could watch it arrive. The realization of who this was, the same man. The hat, the tunic, the young jaw. The soldier he'd kicked for a laugh 6 hours earlier. His face crumpled, not from the pain, from shame, pure shame. "You," he started, "I." And the guard, already turning back to his post, just gave the smallest shake of his head. Like, "Not now, it doesn't matter now." And went still again. I want to tell you it all calmed down after that. It didn't, not for hours. The next part of that afternoon was the longest of my life, and I wasn't even one of the ones hurt. I can't imagine what it was like for them, for the people near the park, for the families who couldn't find each other, for the emergency crews running toward the thing everyone else was running from. They locked the whole area down, police lines, cordons, tape. They moved us back in waves away from the buildings into the open spaces, just like that man had been shouting. There was a long stretch where nobody knew anything and everybody knew everything, if you follow me. Every rumor was fact for about 10 minutes until the next rumor replaced it. What we know now, what came out in the days after, was this. A device had gone off near a service road on the edge of the park. Not the busiest spot, thank God, or it would have been far worse. As it was, the count of injured was in the dozens. People hurt by the blast itself and more hurt in the panic, the crush, the running. There were deaths. I won't dwell on the number. It's not mine to make a spectacle of. But there were lives lost that day, and families that never got those people back. And I think about them every time someone tells this story like it's just a bit of drama. It was real. That's the part the internet forgets. It was real and people died and a lot more nearly did. But in among all that horror, there were the helpers. There always are. The doctors and nurses who happened to be in the crowd and just started working. The taxi drivers who turned off their meters and ferried the walking wounded to hospitals. The shopkeepers who threw their doors open and handed out water, tea, blankets, the use of their phones. The strangers who held strangers' hands and didn't let go. And the men in the red tunics who held the line. I watched them for hours. The guards. They became a fixed point in that whole nightmare. As the police managed the chaos and the medics worked and the crowds were moved this way and that, the guards stood firm at their posts, and somehow that mattered. It told people without a word that the heart of the thing was still beating, that whatever had happened down the road, the center held. Some of them were pulled into the response, of course. There's more to those men than standing pretty, and when something like this happens, the army does what the army does. But a core of them stayed exactly where they were meant to be, including, for a good while, the young one. I lost sight of him eventually. The crowd shifted, the cordons moved, and I got pushed back with everyone else. I never saw him relieved. I never saw him stand down. In my memory, he's just there at the gate, holding on, while London came apart and slowly, painfully, put itself back together around him. Now the tourist. I'll be honest with you. In the days after, I didn't think much about him. He was a footnote. The idiot from the morning who'd got what was coming and then got hurt and then got helped. The world had bigger things to grieve. But the story didn't let him be a footnote. The story found him. Because of course someone had filmed the morning, the kicking, the MAKE way for the Queen's Guard. It was always going to go viral, that kind of thing does, and it did, the very next day, while the city was still raw and grieving. Millions of views. The clip of the loud tourist getting put in his place by the young soldier. And the comments were brutal. People do love to see an arrogant man humbled. They tore him apart, named him, found his accounts. The footage he'd been so proud of, the footage he'd kicked a soldier to capture, became the thing that the whole world used to shame him. For about a day, that was the story. Tourist mocks and kicks Royal Guard, gets what he deserves. Funny, satisfying, tidy. But then the other footage came out. Someone in the crowd, not me, I was too shaken to film anything, and honestly I'm glad someone had caught the afternoon. The bomb, the panic, and the gate. They'd caught the tourist stumbling toward the guards, bloodied and begging. And they'd caught the guard catching him, holding him up. The man who'd been kicked, holding up the man who'd kicked him in the middle of the worst day of both their lives. And when people put the two clips side by side, the morning and the afternoon, the whole story changed. It stopped being funny. It became something else entirely. I watched the conversation turn online over the space of about 2 days. At first people couldn't believe it was the same tourist. Then they couldn't believe it was the same guard. Then it sank in and the tone shifted from cruelty to something quieter, something like awe. Because what are the odds? Of all the men in that line, the frightened tourist stumbles to the one he wronged. And that one, that young soldier, doesn't hesitate, doesn't gloat, doesn't get his own back. Just does the job, holds him up, saves him in a small but real way. Because a man bleeding from the head in a crush during a bomb scare can absolutely die from being ignored. People started saying it was a parable, a lesson. They started writing long, heartfelt posts about character, about discipline, about turning the other cheek. Some of it was overblown, the way the internet always is. But underneath the noise there was something true, and I think people felt it. The true thing was this. One man behaved like the worst version of a human being and another behaved like the best, and then fate put them face to face and gave the better man a chance to take revenge, and he didn't even consider it. It wasn't a struggle for him. That's what got people. You could see in the footage that there was no struggle. No moment of he just helped. Because that's who he was. Because that's what the uniform meant to him when nobody was making him mean it. I learned his name eventually. I won't share it here because I think he'd hate the fuss, and because the men who do that job aren't meant to be famous. They're meant to be a wall you don't notice until you need it. But I learned it, and I learned a little about him, and it fit. Young. Quiet. Took the job seriously in a way that some of his mates apparently ribbed him for. The kind of lad who joined up not for glory but because he believed in something and didn't have the words to explain what. The kind of lad who stands still under 1.5 kilos of fur in the blazing sun, while a stranger kicks him for laughs, and doesn't break, and then runs toward the smoke when everyone else runs away, and then catches that same stranger when he falls. I think about the choice he made at that gate more than almost anything I've ever seen. Because here's what I keep coming back to. We talk a lot about bravery, and we usually mean the loud kind. Running into the fire, facing the enemy. And that's real, and that day there was plenty of it. But there's another kind of bravery that nobody films, that doesn't make a clip go viral, and it's the bravery of not doing the easy, satisfying, ugly thing when you've got every excuse to. He had every excuse. Nobody would have known, nobody would have blamed him. And he held a stranger up anyway. I'll tell you what happened to the tourist in the last part. Because his story isn't over either. What a thing like that does to a man being shown mercy by someone you wronged, on the worst day of your life, it doesn't just wash off. It either breaks you or it remakes you. For him, I think, it did a bit of both. The tourist's name was Marcus. I'll use his first name because his story matters, and you can't tell a story about a man without giving him a name. I didn't meet him that day. Of course I didn't. He was carried off with the rest of the wounded, stitched up at a hospital across the city, kept in overnight for the head injury and the shoulder, which turned out to be dislocated, not broken. He was lucky. Lucky in a way a lot of people that day weren't. I met him later, months later, and the fact that I met him at all is the strangest part of this whole strange story, but I'll get there. First, let me tell you what those weeks were like for the city. Because Marcus was just one thread in a much bigger cloth, and it wouldn't be right to lift him out of it. London grieved. That's the only word. The days after were heavy in a way you could feel on the streets. People were gentle with each other, quieter. The usual rush hour shoving softened into something almost tender. Strangers made eye contact and held it for a second longer than normal, like everyone had silently agreed to be kinder, at least for a while. There were flowers, mountains of them near the park by the cordon at the edges of the place where it happened. Cards, teddy bears, candles that the rain kept putting out and people kept relighting. The names of the lost went up, one by one, and the city read them and wept and learned them by heart. I won't pretend I knew any of them personally. I didn't. But I'd served coffee to that crowd for 11 years, and some part of me felt like I'd probably made a flat white for someone who didn't go home that day. That thought sat in me for a long time. Still does. The guard stood through all of it. Posts manned. Routine kept. There was something about that in the grief that people clung to. Life going on. The old rhythms holding. A man in a red coat standing exactly where men in red coats had stood for generations, through wars and bombs and worse, refusing to let the worst day stop the thing he was there to do. I think that's part of why the footage of the young guard meant so much to people in the end. He became a symbol of it. The whole city's refusal to break. One man, not breaking, twice in one day, in two completely different ways. Now Marcus. When he came out of hospital, he was a different man. I know that sounds like a neat storybook line, the kind you're told to be suspicious of, but I watched it happen over the following year, so I can tell you it's true. Not all at once. Not cleanly, but it was real. The first thing he did, apparently, while he was still in the hospital bed, was try to find the guard. He didn't know his name either, so he did what everyone does now. He went online, and he found the footage of himself, both clips, the morning and the afternoon, side by side, just like the rest of the world was seeing them. I can't imagine what that's like. To lie in a hospital bed, head bandaged, and watch yourself be the villain of a story the whole world is sharing. To see yourself kick a soldier for a laugh, and then, in the next clip, see that same soldier hold you up while you bled and begged. He told me much later that he watched it about 100 times that first night, that he couldn't stop, that every time he got to the part where the guard catches him, he felt sick, not because of the blood, because of the mourning, because he finally understood fully what he'd done and what had been done back to him in return. He should have let me drop, Marcus told me. We were sitting on a bench near my cart on a gray afternoon about a year on. He'd come to find me because he'd heard there was a coffee man who'd seen the whole thing, and he wanted to talk to someone who'd been there. Honestly, after what I did, he should have just let me hit the deck. I'd have deserved it. I didn't say anything. Sometimes you don't. I've thought about it every day, he said. Every single day. I keep thinking, what kind of man does that? Not the kicking. I know what kind of man does the kicking. I was that man, an idiot showing off. But the catching. What kind of man, after what I did, just catches you, doesn't even think about it? A trained one, I said. No, he shook his head. No, it's more than training. I've met trained men. Trained men would have followed the rules. The rules didn't say catch the bloke who kicked you. He did that because of who he is, not because of what he was told. He was quiet for a bit. I tried to find him, he said. To say sorry, to say thank you, both. I don't even know which one matters more. Did you? No, they don't put their names out. And I get it, I do. But I'll tell you what I did instead. And then he told me, and I'll be honest, it took me by surprise. He'd gone home, he was from abroad as I'd guessed, somewhere far off, and he'd been so changed by the whole thing that he'd packed in his old life. The loud life, the showing off life, the chasing attention life. He said it had all felt poisonous to him after that day, like he could see suddenly what it had turned him into, a man who'd kick a soldier for content, who'd treat a human being like a prop. So he'd retrained, as a paramedic. I nearly dropped my cup when he said it. It seemed like the only thing that made sense, he said, almost embarrassed. I was on the ground that day dying, well, not dying, but I thought I was, and the only people who mattered were the ones who ran toward me. The nurse, the guard, the medics, and I thought, I've spent my whole life running toward attention and away from anything hard. What if I spent it running toward people instead? He'd been doing it for 8 months by the time we spoke. Said it was the hardest thing he'd ever done, and the only thing he'd ever been proud of. Said he thought about the guard every time he picked someone up off the ground. I figure, he said, I can't ever pay him back. He won't even let me find him, so I just pass it on to whoever's bleeding in front of me. That's all I've got. I've told this story a lot of times since, at the cart mostly, to regulars, to tourists who ask why I get a funny look on my face when the guards do their changing. And every time I tell it, someone asks the same question. What happened to the guard? And the honest answer is, I don't know, not really. He went on being a guard, I assume. For as long as his service ran, and then he did whatever those young men do after. He never gave an interview, never put his name to it, never cashed in, though he easily could have. The footage made him famous and he stayed a ghost. And I've come to think that's the most fitting ending there could be. Because the whole point of him, the thing that made the story matter, was that he did the right thing when no one was making him, when the cameras were down, when the crowd was running, when the man in front of him deserved nothing. He helped anyway, and then he stepped back into the line and went still, and he didn't want a single thing for it. A man like that doesn't need the world to know his name. The world knowing would almost spoil it. I think about the two of them sometimes. Marcus, somewhere far off, lifting strangers off the ground in the middle of the night because of one afternoon in London. And the guard, wherever he is, who probably doesn't even remember the loud tourist, who held up 100 frightened people that day and 100 more he never knew about, just by standing still and refusing to break. Two men, one terrible day, one small choice at a gate that nobody was watching. Here's what it taught me, and then I'll let you go. We spend so much time deciding who deserves our kindness. We keep these little accounts in our heads. He was rude to me so. She wronged me so. They didn't earn it so. And we feel justified holding back, settling scores, letting people drop. That guard could have kept that account. He had every right to. The man bleeding in front of him had humiliated him in front of the world that very morning. If anyone had ever earned a moment of no, not you, not after what you did, it was him. And he didn't keep the account. He didn't even open it. He just reached out and held the man up. I'm not saying be a saint. I'm not one. I froze that morning, remember. I should have told the idiot to pack it in and I didn't. I'm no better than anyone. But I saw what it looks like that day. I saw what a person can be when they decide that who they are doesn't depend on how they're treated. I saw a man stay exactly himself, calm, decent, unbreakable through humiliation and terror, and the easiest revenge anyone was ever handed. And I've tried, in my small way behind my little cart, to be more like that. To hand the coffee over with a kind word even to the ones who don't deserve it. To not keep the account. Most days I fail, but I keep trying. Because of a young man in a red coat I never properly met, who stood his post on the worst day London had seen in years, and held up the one person in that whole crowd who'd done nothing to earn it. The cameras were off, the crowd was running, nobody would have ever known. And he did it anyway. That's the whole story. That's the part that keeps me up at night, and the part that gets me out of bed in the morning, both at once. He didn't move when he was mocked. And when it mattered, when a man he had every reason to hate fell at his feet and begged, he was the first to move. I hope wherever he is, somebody's kind to him today. Lord knows he earned it, and Lord knows he'd never ask.